Hey everyone, I'm Nishanth and I'm a software engineer at GeekyAnts. In this video, I'll walk you through one of the most exciting features of Next.js 15, that is server actions. You will see how server actions simplify data handling, eliminate the need for implementing API routes, and give us a much more elegant way to work with forms in React 90. Alright, let's begin by setting up a fresh Next.js 15 project using the official scaffolding tool provided by Nextjs. Here, we can type the command as npx space create next app. Next, it'll prompt us the project name. We can type it as next 15 server actions or any other name that you would like to add. And we would like to also select the default options that Next.js provides. We need TypeScript, we need ESLint, we need Tailwind, and we also need an SRC directory. And we would also like to use app router. I would like to give a caution over here. When you come to this particular option, would you like to use app router? You have to choose yes, because Next.js has app router as well as a page router. But server actions is only available in app router, but not in page router. So you got to be careful and always choose app router as your recommended option. And we select yes, and we would not like to use the top-up app, and we would not like to change the import yes. So no. And we would like to wait, and the dependencies will get installed, and we will be ready to code. Here the dependencies have been installed and have opened the project in Visual Studio Code. You guys can feel free to use any IDE that you're comfortable with, but I am comfortable with Visual Studio Code, so I'm going to continue with the Visual Studio Code and I'm going to open a new terminal. So in order to run this particular Next.js project, we're going to use the command yarn dev, and it says localhost port 3000 is in use and it's going to use 3001. So we will open this particular project in localhost 2001. Then we press enter. We can see this nice UI. We can start editing this UI by going to the page.tsx in the app folder. So when we click on page.tsx, we can see a bunch of HTML code have been provided to us by Next.js. We can delete this and we can change the function name from home to page, and we can safely remove this import statement. So now, before diving deep into what is server actions, how it is used, why it is used, first I would like to show you how to submit a form and how this form data is sent to an API route. This API route will be created in Next.js itself, and how the API route processes this form data and provides us the response back. I'm going to show you by writing code, and after this we will see how server actions work, how it is implemented, and why we use that. Okay. So now we're going to create a form element. We're going to provide class name for it. I'm going to use Tailwind CSS over here. If you're not comfortable with it, feel free to use normal CSS. That's totally fine. I'm going to provide the class flex and flex direction column and a gap of 4 and max width of 320 pixels and margin auto along the y-axis. I'm also going to use an input element. The input element type will be text. The name of the input element will be message. And the placeholder will be enter a message. We can also provide class name for this. We can provide border, and we can add Alibu. And we can add purposeful. Now, after the input element have been added, you can add a button. Button will have a text submit. You can also add class name, and you can also provide class name as cursor pointer. You can have digit view 600. This is a default blue color that is provided by Tailwind. You can have text while. You can have click sport padding along x-axis and py2 padding along y-axis. Now, since these changes have been done, we can go to the browser and we can see this form has been rendered. I think instead of submit, we're going to change send message, which makes more sense. Now that the form has been created, the UI has been created, right? So now let's create a function that's gonna take the form value and make an API request. Okay, so we're going to create a callback function called as handle submit, right? So can use an arrow function over here. This function is going to take a parameter of type form event and HTML form element, and we're going to use p.prevent default so that the page doesn't reload and the form doesn't get cleared. We're going to get form data from the event object, give form data key dot current object. This particular line will return us a form data which can be used to send to the API route. We're going to shortly create the API route, so don't worry about it. So we're going to make an API call now. Wait, we're going to use fetch. You can use actions also. We're going to use API / message. This is the Next.js. This format of creating routes in Next.js is the standard way. In the app, we're going to create API folder, and inside API folder, we're going to have message folder, and inside that, we're going to have root.ts. In root.ts, we're going to create a function called as export sync function post, and post has to be in caps. This particular function will receive a parameter request of type request. We're going to use try catch block. For now, we're going to use error. Here, we're going to get the form data from the request. So form data is equal to request dot form data, and you can see this form data returns a promise. So we're going to await this, and after this, we are going to get the message from form data dot get just message. We're going to use toString to convert it into string, and if this is a falsy value, we're going to provide a fallback. So we're going to check if message dot trim is true. If it's actually false, so if this expression evaluates to true, that means after message is being trimmed, and if it's empty, they're going to return a next response dot error, right? And if the message is not empty, we can return next response. And if you're wondering where this next response came, it is imported from Next server, because this particular function is run on server, unlike the page component which runs in browser, that is client. So next response, we're going to return it as a JSON, and we will pass a key result, and we're going to pass received message, and I'm going to make this template nipples, right? And inside catch, we're just going to console error, right? And we're going to return next response.json as invalid message, and they will set the status as 400. Okay, now the post method for the route API / message has been created. Now if we go back to this, we have awaited this fetch method, and For the fetch, we have provided the URL, but we also need to provide few options as the type, the method that we have to use. That is, it's going to be post method, and the body of the post will be formed, right? And since we are using await, we have to make this particular function as async, and this fetch will return a result object, and we can fetch the result. We can, instead of result, we're going to make it response, and we can use response.json, right? And you can see this JSON returns a promise, so we're going to use the await keyword over here, and then we're going to pass this result to 1. So whenever they submit the form, and the form data is sent to the route, and when the route process the object, the form data, the result will be sent to the alert. So here in root, instead of throwing an actual error, we can just type JSON. We can send a JSON instead. It's going to be error, it's going to be result, and it's going to be invalid message, and it's going to be status 4000. So we can also import an error, and if result does not exist, we can use error. You can notice that we have not passed this handle submit to any prog. So over here in the form, we can pass this to the on submit and this. Okay, and now the TypeScript error is gone. Over here in the button, we have to mention the type as submit, right? Now we have completed the form UI. We have also created an API route, and we have also created an handle submit callback function, which takes in the form event, and it's going to create a form data, and this form data is then sent to the route API/message as using post method, and then we are going to get the response, and we are going to alert this. All right, so now let's go to the browser to test it out, and now you can see that there's a runtime error. It says event handlers cannot be passed to client component props, and you can see that this particular component is being rendered in server. So whenever we provide a callback function to any component, the particular component needs to run on the client, not on server. In order to do that, we're going to use client. I'm going to save this file, and if we go to the browser, the error should have gone, and we can see the form. All right, over here we can click on inspect so that we can see the network requests that are being made. Okay, we're going to filter it. You can type something. You can type hello log, and when you click on send message, you can see that message has been sent, and we have received the message as hello y'all. If you click on this message, we can go to payload, and we can see that we have sent the form data as hello y'all, and the response we have received is, and the response, anyway, forget that. We can click on OK. But if you go back to the code and see, we have written the UI, which is fine. This is required. We have written a function that actually sends the form data to this particular API, receives the response, and then alerts it. Don't you think that creating this route and creating this particular function is a bit tedious? Don't you think it's better if we can not create this particular function and not create this such long API route? So the solution for this is server actions. In Nextjs 15, Next.js 15 introduced server actions. So instead of setting up API routes and creating a callback function that's going to submit the form to the API and then receives the response and alerts or do some other operation, we can directly utilize server actions and call them using form. Okay. Now we're going to see how exactly we're going to implement server actions and how easy it's going to make and how easy the coding can be. Okay. So for that, we're going to create a basic form which is already present over here. We're just going to remove this handle submit. Okay. We are not going to use this form event as well. We're going to remove this. And if we go back to our browser, we can and refresh this. You can see there are no UI changes, whatsoever. Okay. Now we'll go back to the code. We're going to create a use action state. A use action state is a hook that is provided by React that is especially used to make server action calls. This use action state receives two arguments. One is the action itself, and then it's going to receive a permalink, which is optional. And it's going to also take an initial state. Okay, 3 arguments. So what we can do is we have not yet created the action, so we're going to leave it as empty, and then we're going to pass an empty string. So let's start by creating this particular action. Over here in src, we're going to create a lib folder, and we're going to create action.ts. Okay, by adding the action.ts inside the lib folder, which is in turn added inside the src folder, we will be able to maintain our code more easily, and even the readability of our products and the readability of our application code will be more easier. So basically, a server action is a function that can run seamlessly on a server. Server actions is a feature that is supported by Next.js and not React. So if you want to use server actions, you have to use Next.js and you have to use app router. So over here, the server action, we have to use server, because as I said, server actions are functions that runs on the server and not on the client, that is the browser. And since server actions are can run on server, we can use async function, and we can name this as send message, right? And it's going to take 2 parameters, which is empty and send message takes 2 parameters. We do not care about the first parameter, and the second parameter will be the form data itself, which is submitted from the form, and the type will be form data, right? And over here, the first parameter type will be of unknown, just to make the TypeScript happy. We're gonna get the message from form data by using the get method and passing message as a prop, and then converting into string. And if it is empty, we're going to provide a fallback of default empty string, and we're going to console a log just to show that this function runs on server, right? Which will be logged right over here. So, and then if the message is empty after trimming it, we're going to send a string saying message is required. And if it's correct, then we'll send message received. Here we're using the template string, pasting literal, and this, and we need to export this function so that it can be utilized anywhere that we want in the project. So we can see that there's an error in the page.tsx saying that we cannot find this underscore. Now this use action state receives an action, and since we have already defined the action, we can pass it to the use action state, and we can do this. Okay. We have successfully invoked use action state by passing send message and then empty initial state. But use action state returns two values, right? One is the response and one is form action, right? Response is of type string and form action is a callback function. It doesn't return anything. That's why. So this form action can be invoked by passing this to the form action prop, which is similar to the on-click prop that we used previously in order to submit the form later to the API route. But instead, we're going to use action. Okay. And this is the response that we will receive. So over here below the button, so if response exists, we're going to print the response. Okay. Just for verification in the front end. We can add a margin top of 16 pixels. We can add text color green, generally 600, and this is a default color that is provided by Tailwind for us. And if you save it, you can see that the page has been compiled, and we can go back to the browser, refresh it, right? And if we type any message, testing server actions, and if we send the message, we can see that message received, testing server actions. So if we go back to the code, we can see that we are sending this message received and whatever message that we have written, which is testing server actions. And if we also see the terminal, the server, we can see that the console has been logged, which is server action called. This proves that the particular send message function is an action, which is a function that runs on server. And if we go to the console, we can see that it's empty, right? Alright, you guys. We have seen how server actions in Next.js 15 give us a clean and powerful way to handle server-side logic directly without relying on traditional API routes. They help us reduce boilerplate code, streamline form handling, and keep sensitive logic securely on the server. Whether it's submitting the data, or running secure calculations, or even interacting with the database, server actions let us keep things simple, safe, and scalable. Thanks for watching. Hope this helped you understand how server actions can level up your Next.js project.